We are ready.
Thank you, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all, and thanks for joining us here this morning. So President Narducci is with us, but suffering a little bit of bronchitis. So while he's here, I'll just kind of handle the logistics of running the meeting for us. And with that, I will call this meeting to order at 10:01. And Director Williams, will you handle roll call for us?
Thank you, Vice President Corr. Member Baker.
Present.
Member Broussard. Member Burton.
Present.
Dr. Corr.
Present.
Superintendent Hoffman.
Here.
Member Kay.
Present.
Dr. Mack.
Here.
Dr. Robbins. Member Ruiz.
Present.
Member Wellborn.
Present.
President Narducci.
Here.
You have a quorum, Dr. Corr.
Thank you so much. And with that, there is no president's report at this time, so we'll move right into the superintendent's report. Superintendent Hoffman.
Thank you so much. Good morning, President Narducci, Vice President Corr, and board members. I do have quite a bit to share with you today. I first want to take a moment to acknowledge respectfully the geographical landscape of Maricopa County sits on the ancestral homelands of those indigenous nations that have inhabited this land for centuries, including the Pima, Lehigh, and Lavine peoples. First, as we wrap up this year, I want to congratulate all of our 2021 graduates. Each of them has worked so hard during a particularly challenging year. I also want to thank our teachers, staff, parents, and community members who supported and guided our students through this year. I know it wasn't always easy as we navigated this unprecedented pandemic. I'm grateful to each member of our education community and inspired by your resiliency and commitment to learning and growing. During this year's spring testing window, teachers, students, and families went above and beyond to ensure that students were tested safely and accurately throughout the state. There were many logistical challenges that schools had to navigate in order to safely administer our statewide assessments, including the AZM2, the AZELA, AZ-SCI, and MSAA. Thanks to that hard work, I am so proud to announce that Arizona ensured that approximately 74% of eligible students have been administered the AZM2. Approximately 78% of eligible students have been administered the AZ-SCI, which is in grades 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade. Approximately 94.2% of eligible students have been administered the AZELA spring reassessment, and approximately 81.5% of eligible students have been administered the MSAA. In a year then when more than ever, we need to know our students' strengths and weaknesses, I'm so grateful that we will have access to these data. This will be critical for the department and the state board to evaluate how students achieved during such an unprecedented year and how to best allocate resources for targeted supports and services. Next, to address ESSER 3, otherwise known as the K-12 funding from the American Rescue Plan. While I hope that everyone takes some time to rest and recover ahead of the next school year, I know that many of us in the education community are kicking off our preparation and planning to welcome students and families back on campus for our first quote unquote typical school year in almost 2 years. A major part of these efforts includes the allocation and distribution of ESSER 3 federal recovery dollars coming from the American Rescue Plan. Starting today, LEAs will be able to apply for funding from ESSER 3, and Title I LEAs in Arizona are expected to receive approximately $2.3 billion in new federal recovery funds. In addition, ADE will be allocating $49.4 million out of our $64 million of flexible discretionary funds to ensure that every LEA receives a minimum of $570 per pupil. Unlike the two prior packages, ADE and our public schools are required to use a portion of these funds to equitably increase student learning opportunities given the impact of the pandemic on student learning and mental health. All activities and interventions using these required reserved funds must be evidence-based, respond to students' academic, social, and emotional needs, and address the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on our most vulnerable student populations. Some examples of supported activities include summer learning or summer enrichment programs, extended day and extended school year programs, and comprehensive after-school programs. LEAs can now find their ESSER 3 allocations as well as how to apply on our COVID-19 page under the Federal Recovery Funds. We will be hosting several webinars starting tomorrow, May 25th, to support schools as they draw down on these funds and meet the various reporting requirements of the federal government. School leaders should have already received an email to sign up for those webinars, and if not, please email esser@azed.gov to receive the sign-up link. Additionally, one of the requirements through the American Rescue Plan is to ensure a robust stakeholder process to support decision-making. As a part of our efforts to gather feedback, ADE will relaunch our Equitable and Effective Schools Task Force to gather stakeholder input on how we will strategically spend $180 million of set-aside discretionary dollars from ESSER 3. This bucket of funds is less flexible and must address the impact of COVID-19 on the state's most vulnerable and underserved subgroups of students through evidence-based interventions and programs. The Equitable and Effective Schools Task Force will meet twice in June and includes almost 100 education and community members, including teachers, school board members, principals, superintendents, business leaders, state lawmakers, and professionals from nonprofits and organizations serving parents. The State Board of Education will be represented by Director Williams on the task force. We look forward to the upcoming first meeting in June, and we'll keep the board updated in regards to announcements surrounding this important work. Another aspect of our preparations for the next year is our Ready for School task force and the companion public messaging campaign, which will be aimed at re-engaging students in our public schools. This task force, the Ready for School task force, brings together representatives from tribal communities, education associations, community organizations, city and state agencies, schools, and more to help address the persisting challenges related to the pandemic in advance of the 21-22 school year. The Arizona Ready for School task force is a part of ADE's larger Ready for School campaign, which consists of proactive efforts to empower parents and students with trusted information and critical resources to support enrollment and re-engagement efforts statewide, and to provide schools with needed resources and tools to maximize success in the next school year. Finally, to wrap up, we're wrapping up Mental Health Awareness Month, and I want to acknowledge the extra recovery support that many may need. And I want to also share our recent collaboration with Access and ADHS, which is the Educator Peer Support Program. We've heard a lot about the mental health needs of our students, but the same goes for our educators. Educators, including administrative staff and school leaders, have had an incredibly challenging year amid COVID-19. They've been faced with difficult decision-making around learning and a lot of high-pressure decisions around the conversations and work that needs to be done to serve their students. There's also been loss in our communities, whether it's from death from COVID-19 or death by suicide. Many educators and school leaders have endured and faced different types of trauma as well. So ADE partnered with Access and ADHS to provide and to develop an educator peer support program to support the mental well-being of our educators, which is similar to programs that have been developed for healthcare workers dealing with the trauma of COVID-19 response. And so we're excited to announce that the program is now open and available for free to all Arizona educators and administrators. By using this program, educators and administrators will be paired with a peer educator who can help to alleviate the pressure that can sometimes lead to destructive behavior. And to learn more about this program or to sign up and get paired up with a trained peer coach, the website is azeducator.org. So we do encourage any educator, teacher, principal, district leader, charter leader who's experiencing any kind of stress and mental health challenges to please check this out and to take advantage of this free resource. And that concludes my report for today.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Hoffman. And next up, Executive Director's Report. Alicia, you have anything to share, or should we move on?
Thank you, President Corr. Not at this time.
Okay, very good. Then we'll move on to the call to the public. Once again, this is a time for the public to comment on items not on today's agenda or on the consent portion of the agenda. Speakers, as always, will be limited to 3 minutes. Director Williams, have we received any requests to chat with us?
Yes, Vice President Corr, members of the board, we have 6 individuals who have signed up to provide public comment to the board today. Jessica, if you could pull up the timer. Also, for the record, there were 2 written comments received before the deadline on Friday, one from the Navajo County Superintendent's Office and a written note of support for Washington's elementary teacher prep program from A for Arizona. First up to speak, I'm sorry, Dr. Corr.
I just said fantastic. Thank you.
Perfect. First up, we have Deborah Stevens, followed by Macy Vanessa. Deborah?
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to join you today. The reason that I have been afforded this opportunity is on June 12th, 2020, I applied for SME certification in the field of humanities for grades 6 through 12. And I was consequently denied that certification. I have both experience in humanities as well as a Master's of Arts in Liberal Studies degree, which was truly interdisciplinary. I have been through the entire appeal process, as I feel very strongly that I should be granted this certification in the state of Arizona. I've been through the appeals process, as I mentioned, and the recommendation from Prudence Lee was that the original decision be overturned. So I'm not sure what kind of questions and background you need. There's been a lot of paperwork generated for this process. That's sort of it in broad strokes in a nutshell. If you could let me know what you need to know or what other support I can provide to you at this time, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Deborah. For the board's requested speak policy, the board members can't ask you questions pertaining to your agenda item today, but thank you for providing public comment on your agenda item. Does that conclude your request to speak?
I'm not sure what else I'm supposed to do because I believe you have all of this information already. Is that correct?
Board members do have all the information pertaining to your certification or appeal, correct?
Okay, so it is my plea to the Arizona State Board of Education that as a qualified, experienced, and successful educator, that you concur with Prudence Lee's findings and please grant this certification to me expeditiously as it's been, and I understand there's been COVID, of course, but it has been almost a year since I made that application.
Thank you, Deb. Appreciate you and sharing your comments.
My other question would be, will you be making that decision today, please?
Well, I could certainly, go ahead, Alicia. Go ahead.
Deborah, it's an agenda item on today's agenda, and board staff will reach out to you after the agenda item has been voted upon.
Okay, and how will I receive that information, please?
Board staff will reach out to you.
I mean, does that mean email, a phone call? I'm supposed to stay online? Help me understand, please.
Deborah, after you provide your public comment, you will be removed from today's agenda or removed from the Zoom call. And then you can follow along with the board's meeting on the YouTube link. And then a board staffer will follow up by email and certified mailing.
Okay, I do not have that YouTube link, please.
I will have a board member, I'll have a board staffer send it to you.
Okay, and what's the time frame after that?
Deb, I'm gonna kind of jump in here. You're making comments during the call to the public, and I understand you have some very specific conditions related to your situation. But Alicia, I would ask that maybe we move on and take Deb and her particular issue offline so we can move on with our agenda, if that meets with everyone's approval.
Yes, I can do that, Dr. Kaur. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. And thank you, Deb. I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Macy Vanessa, followed by Yvonne So. Macy? Jessica, is Macy on the call today? There we go. Macy, you're up next.
Oh, sorry, that's me. I was having some tech issues.
No worries, we can hear you and see you. Please proceed.
Okay. Well, my name is Macy. I graduated high school in Arizona about a couple days ago, and I was just hoping to speak to the board about the current state of sort of the inclusion of API studies within our education system. So from K through 4, I attended a public elementary school, and then from 5th through 12th grade, I attended Basis Chandler. And I spoke to a couple of my friends who attended public high schools as well, just sort of about how API history and society is often taught within our schools. And I think one of the things that we came to a consensus about was that it really is not taught to a satisfactory extent, especially within history and social studies classes. There seems to be this really large disconnect between what's actually the state of Asian American and Pacific Islanders within the United States and Arizona and our history and what's being taught. Often within sort of higher level AP classes, API studies is sort of pushed to the side, and we really only talk about like the Chinese Exclusion Act or Japanese internment, as opposed to sort of the long-standing structures that have hurt APIs within the United States. But there's also not much room to celebrate our history within Arizona and the United States. And I think one of the things that really struck home when I was speaking to a friend who attends McClintock High School was that the sort of extent of API knowledge within the students at her school only really goes towards ancient China and Mongolia. And even there's a really negative interpretation or view of historical figures like Genghis Khan, and making jokes about like the violence and history behind them. And I think it speaks to sort of a larger issue where we're not focusing on the really extent and roots of Asian American and Pacific Islanders living in the United States and Arizona. And we're not teaching that history and culture properly within our classrooms. And I think it extends beyond history and social science as well. I mean, within English or math or science classes, it's extremely Eurocentric. We're always talking about, white scholars or mathematicians or chemists. And even if the curriculum does have room to talk about the roots of where we learn, the structure of an atom or what a cell looks like in biology, teachers without the proper resources and knowledge and students without that exposure seem to just gravitate towards the topics that are heavily Eurocentric or dominated by white voices. And I think it's starting to present an issue in terms of how students can engage with the curriculum at their schools. And I really wanted to just bring that to attention with you all. So thank you again for allowing me to speak. And I really hope you take into some of the things I said into consideration.
Thank you so much, Macy, and congratulations on your recent graduation. And appreciate you spending some time here with us this morning.
Yeah, thank you all.
Next up, we have Yvonne So, followed by Jaylen Gantt. Yvonne?
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to touch upon what Macy talked about as well. I think what Superintendent Hoffman pointed out, it's the end of Mental Health Month, but also what she forgot, it's also the end of Asian and Pacific American Heritage Month. You know, it's very important, especially this year, because Asian and Asian American Pacific Islander hate crimes continue to rise at an alarming pace. You know, Stop AAPI Hate reports 6,600 incidents from March 2020 to March 2021. So what these numbers really represent is just how widespread the issue of anti-Asian hate is. API data track that 1 in every 4 API are affected by racism overall, and 1 in 10 so far in 2021. So the fact that Asian Americans remain largely invisible in American society cannot be disentangled from this sharp rise in hate incidents. And it's important for our society to acknowledge that the roots and background of anti-Asian sentiment are not new or isolated, but are in fact part of American history. This whole foreigner notion is deep-rooted in systemic racism. At one point in our history was codified into law with exclusionary laws. So, but you know, nevertheless, our society tends to brush over these chapters of US history and really delve into the long-lasting shadows of these events in our classroom. And that's very sad because the history of Asian Americans is deeply intertwined together with America's own history, yet it's often ignored or forgotten in today's classroom and public discourse. You know, I just touched upon history classes, and Macy talked about this as well, but API representation in English and science is even more paltry. You know, why is my child still reading Ramona Quimby in 2021? I read that book in the 1980s, and I read it again with my son recently, and it's just, not only is it dated, but there's so many other amazing published authors in the past 30 years who touch upon family and childhood angst. We could feature those authors. You know, an AAP example is Sam Wu's Not Afraid of the Dark series. So we just really need to teach more creatively and think outside of the box. A Stanford study published in psychological science shows that students of color are more engaged and get better grades when they see themselves in their studies. And this is even more important now because the 2020 Census Bureau projects by the middle of 2020, non-whites will account for the majority of the nation's 74 million children in the classroom. So our class materials really need to evolve with the times. You know, it's really no wonder that 42% Americans cannot name one Asian Americans. And so more than ever, it's really important to remind America that our roots in this country run deep, and our accomplishments to the social, economic, and cultural fabric of America are valued, appreciated, and celebrated. The API community is the fastest growing minority group in Arizona and in the US. Chinese immigration to Arizona precedes our statehood. You know, the earliest Chinese settlers came to Arizona in 1863. So we've really been citizens of this country for more than a century and a half. And, you know, Macy also touched upon some of the uglier aspects of Arizona history with the API community, including the Japanese incarceration during World War II. We have 2 prison camps right here in Arizona in Gila River and Poston. It's been a breath of fresh air to see some states take legislative action. Illinois recently passed the TEACH Act that introduces API curriculum in K through 12 of the system. And Texas is currently debating HB 1504 that requires ethnic studies in public schools. So it's really time for us in Arizona and us as a nation to have history books that reflect the true colors of our society.
Thank you. Thank you, Yvonne. Appreciate those comments.
Next up, we have Jaylen Gantt, followed by Carole Lopez. Superintendent Gantt.
Sorry, it took me a moment. I'll be reading a statement. Good morning from Navajo County. Thank you, President Narducci and members of the board. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Superintendent Hoffman, for the wonderful updates. That's very exciting news. As the Navajo County Superintendent of Schools, I have the duty to provide guidance, support, and a service to the schools under my purview. All the districts, Kayenta, Native, Pinyon, Cedar, Winslow, Joseph City, Holbrook, Incad, Nabot, Snowflake, Shoalo, Heber, Overguard, Blue Ridge, and White River. So keeping the best interests of all the districts is the mission. More than 2,500 district employees are counting on us. If anything should happen that puts the payroll in peril, we are obligated to speak up for those 2,500 employees. This is in regards to the application for the Blue Ridge Unified School District to have fiscal responsibility. The county treasurer's software system is fragile. This is painful to discuss, yet it is the system we live with for now. The Board of Supervisors just approved purchase of a new system that will be up and running in about 18 months to 2 years. In the meantime, we have to protect what we currently have. The impact of a system failure impacts all the districts. Our position of recommending a revisit in the future would be for any district applying for fiscal responsibility. We need time to conduct a feasibility study, and without a feasibility study, we are wide open to a crash. This study needs to be done after the new system in place. We do not fully know the details of the system. In school finance, it's all about the details. Per current state statute, outside of notification, the applying district is not required to contact the impacted county office, the Auditor General, and the Arizona Department of Ed. When they receive the plan of implementation, are not required to contact the impacted county offices. We just saw this plan as part of the agenda materials. We never received the plan that we would be obligated to implement from the district. If approved by statute, we shall implement, not may. The county repeatedly was cautioned on our software issues, documented in our written comments. Any plan should be done accurately to ensure success. The school districts collectively are the largest employer in Navajo County. This needs to be done right. If approved, we know that undoing the operation is extremely difficult. Let's not rush. Too many people are depending that it be done right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Carole Lopez, followed by Estrella Wong. Carrie? Carrie, you're unmuted, so we can hear you if you would like to start.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
We can.
Go ahead.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. I don't know how to turn my camera on, but okay. So thank you, President and members of the board, for allowing me to speak today. My name is Carole Lopez, and I am the treasurer in Navajo County. I come before you to voice my concerns regarding Agenda Item K, approval of Blue Ridge Unified School District's participation in the Accounting Responsibility Program. I have three major concerns with Blue Ridge's request to assume accounting responsibility. First, I have been very transparent about the fragile state of the treasurer's system and the progress toward purchasing and converting to a new supported system. Our IT department has recommended a feasibility study be completed due to the extremely advanced age of our system. It is over 25 years old, makes the possibility of a crash a real and present danger. If the treasurer's system goes down, vital data for the county, school districts, and other entities may be lost. Navajo County Board of Supervisors has approved the purchase of a new system, which will take 1.5 to 2 years to implement. Waiting until conversion is complete will not only help keep our existing system stable, but it will also save Blue Ridge time and money, as it will be easier and possible to develop an interface with the current fully supported system and fulfill our statutory obligation for this transition. Second, Blue Ridge has not provided a transition plan to my office. Involving all partners in the creation of a transition plan is vital to the success of the change. The first time I saw the plan of accounting responsibility was on May 19th, when it was attached to this board agenda. A review of the plan clearly shows a lack of communication with the Treasurer's Office, as our system cannot support the procedures in this plan. For instance, the plan states the district will create Arizona warrants, transfer files, and submits the treasurer via website. Our website does not allow for the uploading of files by our entities. An upload to the county treasurer's office is discussed elsewhere in this plan. The current system cannot support this due to the age and volatility of the system. The plan before you can't be executed at this time with the current treasurer's system, and this will impact Blue Ridge's ability to make payroll and reconcile directly with my office. Finally, there has been a lack of communication to address the issues that were brought up in April 2020 and then again in January and April of this year. It is vital for the district to have open, transparent communication with the county Treasurer's Office when considering assuming financial responsibility and/or banking procedural changes to develop a plan that can be fully executed. These are significant concerns that will take time to resolve, and some that are beyond our reach at this time. I am therefore asking you to pull Blue Ridge's application until fiscal year 24 to allow the county the time to implement its new treasurer system and work with Blue Ridge to create an accurate, realistic transition plan that can be executed using their system and the new treasurer system. Thank you again for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you, Carrie.
Lastly, we have Estrella Wong.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Astria Wong. I just want to follow up on Yvonne So and Macy's comment. Asian Americans been in United States since 1863, and yet most people think of us as Asian Americans are foreigners. As a matter of fact, the most decorated regiment in World War II happened to be a Japanese troop, 443, that is actually grew from our internment camp in Arizona, which is really a sad situation when you look at it on both sides, that they are highly decorated, they are all American, and yet a couple days ago, there was a veteran, Asian veteran, was being beaten up by someone and say that you are impersonator, you are not a veteran, I'm a veteran, and therefore you should go back to your home. And this American-born Asian American was beaten up, and as a veteran with veteran uniform. So I think it's about time that we need to take it in consideration that how important Asian American history should be taught in our school, especially for the youngsters from K to 12. So at least everyone would know there is something that here in America that called API, Asian Pacific Islanders. And we are American, just like the Irish or the Italians and everybody else. And so I really would like to see that the board take in consideration in the next year or so that will have included our history, Asian Pacific Islanders history, into the curriculum, even just for English or in history or anything that will just be a little bit more inclusive, because we are American history. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice President Corr, that concludes item number 2.
Thank you, Alicia. So with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. And as we've read and then heard about this morning, there's some significant back and forth that continues as it relates to item 3K. I would like to suggest, given the back and forth that continues to exist with the Navajo County Superintendent and Blue Ridge Superintendent and board staff, I would like to table this item and ask that each of the parties be able to come to some understanding, some shared understanding prior to the June board meeting. And if it would be agreeable with the larger group, I would like to table 3K. In order to do so, I would need a motion and a second to that effect.
Moved. I so move.
Second.
I believe that was Cal and Member Burton. Thank you. So all in favor of tabling item 3K, again, cameras on and unmuted. Please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you. I appreciate that. Hopefully there'll be able to be a meeting of the minds prior to our June meeting. Does any member seek to remove any other of the consent agenda items at this point? Okay, hearing none then, do I have a motion to approve items 3A through 3J and then items 3L through 3P?
So moved.
Member
Second.
Burton, thank you. And Member K, second. Thank you. Any comments, questions?
Vice President Corr?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Was Superintendent Hoffman, please.
I just wanted to highlight, it's D, the approval of the Washington Elementary School District's classroom-based special education educator preparation program application. I just want to highlight this because this is so awesome, and our educator recruitment and retention team in the department has been helping districts like Washington L that want to create these classroom-based teacher prep programs, and this is Washington L's second program, to my knowledge. This one being focused on recruiting and training special education teachers in-house. And this is unique to Arizona, and I know Vail School District really led the way in these endeavors of having a classroom-based teacher prep program. So thank you to Member Baker for leading the way in this regard. But this is unique. I talked with other states that don't have programs like this, and this is a really great way to basically grow your own and recruit from the community. So I just wanted to highlight this as a win for Washington L and for the community.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for doing that. Absolutely. Any other comments, concerns, or questions? I believe we have a motion and a second. So all in favor of approving items 3A through 3J and then items 3L through 3P. Cameras on, mics on, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign. I believe we have unanimous approval. Thank you. Now item 4. This is the time for the public to comment on items on today's general session. As always, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Director Williams, have we received any requests to chat with us?
Yes, Vice President and core members of the board, we have 3 individuals signed up to provide a comment to the board. We also received 2 written comments. One was from an ESA mom, and the second was from Rebecca Cross, and those were provided to the board members on Friday. First up, we have Esle Montenegro, followed by Rebecca Cross. Ms. Montenegro?
Hi there, can you hear me?
You can.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you, President Narducci, State Board of Education, Superintendent, and members of the board for the opportunity. I appreciate your time today. My name is Esli, and I advocate for hundreds of incoming and current ESA families. And as I thank you for your arduous work to continue to help K through 12 families across Arizona, specifically with the Empowerment Scholarship account. Today, I'd like to bring up a common issue that I have seen to be a pattern each time we approach 2 weeks into the Q1 May 1st deadline. That was the deadline for this year for Q1. So the ESA application website gives errors to parents when they submit their first ESA application, and it reads, "Sorry, an error has occurred during processing." And they get that, they can't move forward. My first question is, what did the ADE Solutions team do to fix this ongoing application platform issue? I ask that you please provide an update to prospective families on either your website or their email that they have to indicate what opportunity they're going to have to apply again for Q1, because the website kept crashing on them. And I do have screenshots to provide if you need to see those. Also, where families reach out to, personally one-on-one, I know some families did send out some contacts to the office manager and director about those screenshot errors. So I just appreciate your support and ask that you please provide some prospective ESA families, again, an update, whether it's through their email that they signed up initially on the first page of the application or on your website or newsletter, so that prospective families feel that they do have an opportunity for Q1 that just passed, and that was May 1st. Again, thank you so much for all you do. I know you work arduously behind the scenes, but it is something that we've seen as a common issue, and I do believe it happens every quarter for deadlines every quarter. That is all I have to say. Thank you again for your time and your listening to me today. I appreciate you all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Next up, we have Rebecca Cross, followed by Janine Blair. Rebecca?
Hello, can you hear me?
We
Yes,
can.
Rebecca, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I'm pulling over. We are on our way home from physical therapy. I just wanted to speak to the board today. I wanted to say thank you for the work that was put in for a class wallet debit card. I am an ESA parent. This is, I believe, our 3rd year that we are finishing up in the program. And I currently have 4 kids on ESA that are all home educated. The class wallet debit card is going to allow us to continue to home educate in the same way that the Bank of America card has. However, I do have a couple questions and concerns. We read in the handbook and we're told that we would not be able to use any class wallet vendors, which is going to create an issue where we are going to have to continually check to see if a vendor has signed up, and then also deal with some of the issues that go with class wallet purchasing limits or long delays. A parent talked to Carla Escobar last week in a personal phone call, and the parent said that Carla told them that that is no longer a restriction for the card, that we'll be able to use it at any vendor, I believe minus K-12 schools. But I just am asking that if that is correct, which I really hope it is, that be included in the handbook so we aren't given this contradictory information, where if I buy my child something at a store or with a vendor and I don't know that they've signed up for Class Wallet, I don't want to be caught in the situation where now I have to figure out a way to return that item or have a tutor reverse the transaction or have to pay back the state funds that would not go back to my students even. So I guess that's just my main issue, is getting better clarification, especially in light of this new information that would definitely make it easier for home educating parents. That's the last group that's getting transitioned over, and I know there are a lot of us. So I just appreciate an update on this and hopefully an updated handbook that would reflect this change that Carla communicated to parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Next up, we have Janine Blair.
Executive Director Williams, we do not have Janine Blair with us.
Okay, thank you. Vice President Kaur, that concludes the item number 4.
Thank you so much. Then we'll look to move into our general session. We doing okay? Anyone need a break, or should we just move right into general session? We're all right. Cal's saying move it on. Keep it rolling. All right, Member Baker. That's the way you do it down in Bell. I understand. I'll defer to your wisdom and move us right into the general session. And I believe Director Williams, you're gonna introduce Kate and get us rolling on this one, correct?
Yes, thank you, Vice President Kaur, members of the board. Today for item 5A, and please note that item 5A is information only. It is the requested administrative process from our meeting in April. pertaining to the collections and fraud. And then item 5A1 is an action item, and item 5A2 is also an action item. And those two individual items, 5A1 and 5A2, were two items that were tabled from last meeting. So we do have Chief of Staff Kate Wright to give us a presentation on the administrative process for collections and fraud. Chief of Staff Wright, Jessica will control the PowerPoint for you, and you can just tell her next slide and she'll move it for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, President Narducci, Vice President Kaur, Superintendent Hoffman, and members of the board. I very much appreciate this opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you this morning to explain the administrative process for collections and fraud for the ESA program. When developing the administrative processes that I will describe this morning, the department consulted with the AG's office and aligned these processes with the standard procedures of all other state agencies. Next slide, please. So we'll start by just differentiating between collections and fraud. So an account holder within the ESA program can be referred to one or both, and it is the Attorney General's office who decides if it is beneficial for the state to collect funds or recommend criminal prosecution. Collections is the opportunity for the state to recuperate the state's money. Fraud investigates potential fraud and can then pursue a person with criminal charges. Next slide. There are two reasons that collections would be relevant in the ESA program. The first is for unsubmitted expenses. So in this case, an account holder does not submit a required expense report. At the time when the report is not submitted or received by the department, an account holder receives up to 5 friendly reminders that are automatically generated out of the ESA system. Starts with 5, the reminders end once the ESA expense report is submitted. If we get to 5 without any response, at that point, a suspension letter is sent 1 to 3 days after the expense report due date within the system. This allows the account holder 10 business days to respond or submit the expense report. A removal letter is sent 1 to 3 days by the ESA system, so through email, after the suspension letter timeframe has passed. This does allow the account holder to appeal any termination or submit the outstanding expense report, and there is a 30-day time frame for that to occur. The entire process takes 45 days. If after 45 days, 10 business days within which reminders are being sent and the suspension letter has been forwarded, if during those 45 days there has been no response, nothing from the account holder, at that point the account is closed and referred for collections. And again, this process mirrors the same process for collections that is followed by other state agencies. Next slide. The other situation where collections would be necessitated is if an account holder is issued a suspension letter for disallowed expenses. This means that something was purchased that wasn't allowed. At that point where that is identified, the letter is issued by the ESA system via email. The letter explains that there is a disallowed item. It also outlines any amount that would be owed back to the state, and it allows the account holder 10 business days to respond or repay the amount. A removal letter is also sent 1 to 3 days later by the ESA system after the suspension letter timeframe has passed. So you've got the 10 business days. If within the first 10 business days there's no response from the ESA account holder, the removal letter is the next standard step. It then allows the account holder to appeal, which is always part of the process. They may appeal the termination or submit the expense report or repay the amount that is owed back to the state. After 45 days, that's 10 business days plus 30 days of no response, the account is closed and referred to collections. So the collections that have been forwarded to the state board for action this morning followed these procedures, whether it was an unsubmitted expense report or a disallowed expense. And what is being shared this morning is a culmination of months of communication without response. We do have a backlog of collections that have been shared with the state board this morning as we bumped from last month up to this month. However, any account that was resolved has been removed from the list. So just to reassure the state board that the accounts that are being referred for collections are no response. There has been no response from the account holder within this process, which is now extended multiple months as we've been moving this process to the state board for a little bit. Next slide. The other process that the department has created is a fraud process. This is required per statute. Any account holder that is suspected of fraud or has a suspect of intent to defraud the state, we notify a fraud investigator of the suspected fraud. The Department of Education reaches out, works with the AG's office. Information and details are provided in depth to the investigator by the department. If the investigator informs ADE that they will accept, that they identify that there is potential fraud, we bring this to the state board. At the point where it's to the state board, the account holder is not notified of suspected fraud by the department, but the account holder would be notified by the fraud investigator and would at that point be notified of any investigation. Next slide. That's the end. I think that's the end of our processes. So the point that I wanted, and I appreciate your time this morning, is just to, I know that there were questions last month, is just to be very clear about the processes that the department follows in looking at collections and fraud, to help to highlight that this process in both cases is a standard process that's been created with the AG's office support and does mirror the processes that are used in any other state agency for this purpose. And based on the administrative processes that I've described, as Executive Director Williams mentioned, 5A1 and 5A2 is the request of the state board's approval to actually now refer to the Attorney General's office. That referral, your approval, and that referral just allows the review to begin and for any recommended action to take place. And Executive Director Williams, I'm going to defer to you for the processes for 5A1 and 5A2.
Great, thank you so much, Chief of Staff Wright. Vice President Corr, if the board members do not have any questions pertaining to the administrative process that Chief of Staff Wright has outlined, then I would suggest moving to the action items of 5A1 and 5A2.
I will absolutely do that. Let me make sure there are no questions. It looks like Member Burton might, please, Christine.
Yeah, thank you, Vice President Corr, members, and Kate. I have a question about disallowed expenses. We've heard we've had a number of comments about that, and I understand, an account holder is issued a suspension letter and explains that there is a disallowed item, but do you explain why the item is disallowed? It seems to be that there's some confusion about that. So could you just elaborate on that?
Vice President Corr, Member Burton, thank you for your question. Yes, my understanding is that any disallowed item is explained to the account holder. If the account holder disagrees or doesn't feel confident that that's the case, then their right per this process is to appeal. And at that point, if that's happened, they are not on the list for collections to be referred to the AG's office. So those that are on the list have had no communication. They have not responded. They have not appealed. In the case that you're describing, absolutely, that could happen. Certainly, that dialogue is welcomed between the account holder and the department, and that interaction would continue before we would get to the point where any account is being referred for collections.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Chief of Staff Wright? All right, hearing none, then do I in fact have a motion to refer the listed cases to the Attorney General's Office of Collections? I'm on 3A1. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Baker, do I have a second?
Second.
Who was that?
Member Mack.
Thank you, Member Mack. Any other discussion? All in favor, please indicate, yeah, cameras on, please, if you would, and unmuted. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you. Moving on to 5A2. Do I have a motion to refer case number 001F to the Attorney General's Office for criminal investigation? Do I have such a motion?
So move.
Member Baker, do I have a second?
Second.
I can't tell if that was Dr. Mack or Member Wellborn. I'm gonna go Member Wellborn by a nose on the second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you so much. And Kate, thanks for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you.
Moving on to 5B. This is a presentation and discussion of the Empowerment Scholarship Account Q3 report. This is for information only and will be handled by Director Williams.
Thank you, Vice President, core members of the board. We have Deputy Chief of Staff Whitney Marsh here to present the PowerPoint presentation for 5B. Whitney, Jessica will run the PowerPoint for you. You just tell her when to move to the next slide.
Great, thank you, Alicia and Jessica. Good morning, President Narducci, Vice President Core, Superintendent Hoffman, and members of the board. I am Whitney Marsh, Deputy Chief of Staff at the Arizona Department of Education, and have been supporting the ESA program with policy implementation for the last year. Thank you for having me this morning to present on the Empowerment Scholarship Account Program updates and Q3 report. Next slide, please. Thank you. The rules adopted by this board require ADE to provide you a quarterly report. The dates of those quarters are included here for your reference. Today, I will be sharing the third quarter report, which ran through March 31st. The topics covered in the report are laid out in the rules and are listed here. I will go through the high-level summary. The full report is included with the agenda materials for this meeting and will also be available on the ESA website following board's review today. Next slide, please. So here we're comparing in several of the tables, because these are the only 2 quarters we've reported to you on so far, we're including these 2 quarters for comparison to provide more information. Total program enrollment grew by just over 1% between Q2 and Q3 this year. And as of March 31st, there were 9,831 active empowerment scholarship accounts. You can see here the majority of students in the program are qualifying as students with special needs and their siblings. Next slide, please. This chart shows enrollment by grade level. The highest enrollment is in grades 3 and 4, but the largest growth between quarters 2 and 3 was in preschool and kindergarten, where we saw 6% growth between Q2 and Q3 in preschool students who were enrolled and 4% in kindergarten. You did see a decline in 11th and 12th grade. 11th was very slight, 12th grade declined by about 2%, which means that there were more students who left the program who were in 12th grade than joined during Q3. Next slide, please. This shows annual award amounts. Most students are receiving about $6,000 to $7,000 every year, but the average is over $14,000, which you can see is pulled up by the high number of students in the $25,000 to $30,000 range. This amount is calculated by school finance at the student level based on the statutory state aid formula that weights funding based on student characteristics, including grade level and disability category for those students with unique needs. Total program awards for this fiscal year are estimated at $138 million. Next slide, please. This table represents the number of applications we received in Q3 compared to Q2 and breaks down by application status. Applications increased by 47% from Q2 to Q3. If you remember in January, I presented to you, and applications have been up this year. So even to see a growth between Q2 and Q3 of 47% is significant. You will notice that while we had growth in the number of applications, an interesting statistic we see here also, though, is that we had fewer incomplete applications submitted, and a higher percentage of the applications submitted were approved. So we're moving in a positive direction with more applications being submitted complete and being eligible for approval, which means that the applicants are more informed of the requirements and for applying to the ESA program. Next slide, please. So here we break down the denied applications by reason of denial. This metric helps us identify where additional training is needed for applicants and staff. Of the about 1,300 applications received in Q3, 204 of them were denied, or about 15% total. You can see here there was quite a spike in the number of applications that were denied for not meeting the 100-day requirement. This is something that has come up in written comments to you and in comments to us as well. The eligibility requirements in law require a student have attended a governmental primary or secondary school as a full-time student for at least the first 100 days of the prior fiscal year. So to be eligible for ESA, you have to have attended a public school for at least the first 100 days of the prior fiscal year. Under our current policy, applications are accepted year-round pursuant to statute, but we have deadlines to receive funding by the next quarter. And the deadline to receive funding in the current fiscal year is February 1st, which falls in this quarter. This means that applications received after February 1st are actually applying for the next school year, which begins July 1st. And because they are applying for the next school year, we look at the current school year, which would be prior, to see if they met the 100th day, which also falls in the third quarter. So what ends up happening is parents that apply after February 1st have to have been enrolled in this current year for the first 100 days. And we're seeing that many, not many, but of the reasons for denial, many of them are not meeting this requirement. So the takeaway here is that there are families who have made the decision not to enroll in public school at the beginning of the year, but didn't apply for whichever reason, didn't apply for the ESA program until later in the year. And because of the way the deadlines are set, it makes them ineligible. So historically, the department has had this practice to align application processing times and funding with the beginning of the next quarter. As I mentioned, the February 1 deadline allows for an application that is processed and enrolled in 45 days to get access to that full Q4 funding at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Because this has been brought up to you and you've asked questions about it, I just wanted to highlight here, we are seeing this in our data as well. And we are currently reviewing this policy internally and with our assistant AG to determine if changes are necessary to these deadlines, and we'll provide an update to you at the next, our next report to the board. Thank you. This chart is a little funky, but the number of applications is listed on the bottom and the days to process the applications is listed on the left. You'll see that most applications received during Q3 were processed in less than 3 days. That long line on the bottom, over 400 applications, were reviewed actually in 1 day or less. And for the 8 that exceeded the 45-day timeline, as you recall, we are required by statute to review and enroll within 45 days. For those 8 that exceeded, they were all incomplete at the time of submission. Next slide, please. This section of the report includes a summary of parent feedback received during the quarter. With the actual report, you'll find summaries from the Parent Advisory Council meetings, written comments submitted through the various forums and surveys. The common themes raised are consistent with what you have received in public comments to the board and in written comments. Challenges with financial management platform and processes, timeliness and consistency of expense review and approval, requests for debit cards and specifics about the debit card policy, and requests for more comprehensive training. Next slide, please. So the rule also requires that we provide a summary of our response to the feedback received. At a high level, regarding requests for debit cards, we have been working with the Treasurer's Office and the private vendor to offer a debit card option. As of last week, all ESA account holders can request a prepaid debit card in the ESA portal for the 2021-2022 school year. The Treasurer's Office is still in the process of amending the contract with the vendor, which is why, as expressed during the public comment, there is some confusion about how the card can be used, what will be allowed, what's not allowed. Those details are currently being finalized, and we are sharing as we have information. We will update the handbook accordingly as soon as that's finalized. We've continued to advocate to the Treasurer's Office and the vendor for maximum flexibility for debit cards. And like I said, we'll continue to share information as we have it available. We do know for sure, though, that debit cards will be in the hands of parents in July. Next slide, please. Actually, can you go back to the last slide? I missed the last bullet. Thank you. In response to parent feedback on implementation of the associated goods or assistive technology policy, the department revised its policy and procedure for review and approval of associated goods for students with disabilities. We had a robust discussion at the last board meeting, and we continue to review our internal processes and training to improve consistency and timeliness of review and approval. This is a work in progress. Next slide, please. Thank you. The rules also require us to collect and respond to feedback regarding the financial management vendor as well. In response to the feedback regarding functionality and service provided by the firm, the department is working with the vendor on the following enhancements. The private financial management firm is currently developing comprehensive account statements and estimates account statements will be accessible in May. I did not have an update as of time that I submitted this presentation, so we'll come back to you with that. The direct pay vendor list in the platform is updated daily now as vendors are approved and following verification of account information. The department has also requested a solution for sorting vendors that are in the marketplace by service and good and location to make it more user-friendly. The department has requested updates to the platform to allow account holders to attach documents with orders for approval to streamline the process, as has been requested by families. As we work to get the new debit cards activated, we have also requested customized MCC codes based on student qualification to allow eligible account holders to use their debit card for assistive technology. As you've heard before with the Bank of America account holders, their cards were not active or allowed to be used for assistive technology because it had been prohibited previously for all accounts. So this is something that we're working on as we look at the new debit card. Next slide, please. This section provides information on the number of accounts in each of the financial management platforms. There are Bank of America accounts included that are not active, but still technically open, which is why the total is more than the total number of accounts, which is 9,831 when you add these two columns together. And just a reminder that all accounts will be transitioned to Class Wallet by July 1st of this year. Next slide, please. As of March 31st, there are 1,582 vendors and providers in the Class Wallet application. This is compared to 1,339 who were registered at the end of Q2. So we are still seeing more vendors and providers get registered in the platform. But we also think that as debit cards become available, this will become less of an issue that we're hearing about because there will be more purchasing options. Next slide, please. So that the last slide wraps up the quarterly report. Now I'm just going to quickly go through some other program updates we wanted to provide. We had published a PDF list of approved expenses at the beginning of the year. We brought those to you and discussed them, and it was a PDF of an Excel file that included rows and rows and rows of tiny font that was hard to search through, but it was what we could get live by the time that we needed it to be live pursuant to the rules. So we had been working over the last several months to create a more user-friendly database. We now have a searchable database of allowable items on the ESA website where you can search by keyword and category. Then each item has a link to take you to that specific item. Again, this is a work in progress. We continue to make enhancements and we'll continue to provide updates. One of the things that came in through a written comment was that it needs to have the date it was most recently updated on here, and that's a good flag and something that we will consider to make a change as soon as possible. And so that's the kind of enhancement that we're looking at. Or right here where all the links are listed, it says link. Does it need to say link, or can you just click on the linked expense title? Things like that we can make adjustments to, but are hoping this makes it much more easier for families to search for items that have been approved by the ESA team. And there's a link to the website there as well where you can see that. Thank you. I mentioned this earlier, all account holders can now request a debit card for use in the 2021-2022 school year. The vendor will have training for new account holders the following dates and times. A link to the Zoom webinar for training is located on the ESA website. If you go to the ClassWallet Live Training drop-down under ClassWallet Information. Bank of America cards will be closed by July 1, and it will take 7 to 10 business days to close, unload, deactivate the cards, and then subsequently load and activate the ClassWallet account with the information. So we saw this last summer and into the fall as we transitioned the other accounts from Bank of America to ClassWallet. We can't have both accounts active at the same time. So there is a period of time during the transition when account holders do not have access to their funds to 7 to 10 days. Next slide, please. Then the last update we wanted to share with you today is on marketing and outreach. So last session, the legislature appropriated $150,000 to the department for statewide seminars and trainings, professional development, marketing, and community outreach activities. Because of COVID, we did have to make adjustments to our plans for what this would look like this year. So clearly we didn't go out across the state and conduct seminars while everything was closed down. And we really focused using those funds on building materials to support training and outreach, making improvements to the website, and doing digital and print advertising. Next slide, please. So we've used those resources to date to make updates to the ESA website. We've created some videos that give general information about the ESA program and how it works. To those videos, the awareness and instructional videos are on the landing page of the ESA website now. We had brochures developed that we have been distributing through partners. We have more. So if you or anyone watching this is interested in getting some of those brochures that they can distribute, just contact. You can contact me. We are also getting brochures in Spanish that will be available for distribution. And there are print ads placed in English and in Spanish across the state in March. And digital ads will continue to run through the summer. Next slide, please. Here we just want to give you some examples of the ads, show you some cute kids. from left to right. There are digital ads, Facebook ads, Spanish, a copy of one of the print ads that ran in the Arizona Republic in March, a screenshot of the front of the brochure down here on the right. The ads drive viewers to the ESA website to get information about eligibility for the program and to apply. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Whitney. A lot of great information. Any questions? Member Burton, then Member Baker.
So Vice President Core, members, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board, I really want to thank Whitney and the whole ESA team. I can tell you have really taken comments to heart and really worked to continuously improve this program. And I know it's not easy, but I see some improvement. You mentioned and Alicia mentioned that we did receive a public comment from an ESA parent that I thought pretty clearly outlined just three concerns. Some of them I think were addressed in your presentation, but I just request that before the next meeting, can board staff get together with the ESA staff to give us some responses to those questions, just to clarify for us what's happening in those areas. I think a lot of it was covered today, but I think it just for me, it would just, she had 3 items, and just sort of a response to those between now and the next meeting would be greatly appreciated. But I just really feel that things are moving in a positive direction, and I certainly have a clear idea of what's going on in the program. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Core Member Burton. We will work with Chief Deputy Marshal.
Member Baker.
Thank you. I agree. Excellent report. Thank you, Whitney. I'm struck when I look at all the numbers and reports at the high average cost, and I am assuming that high cost is due to the fact that so many of the students in the program have been identified as needing special education services, and those services are dependent on each student's IEP. And I would expect also that some of the approvals for purchases are dependent on that IEP. How often are the IEPs for students in the ESA program reviewed?
Thank you, Vice President Core and Member Baker. They're not reviewed. So once you become an ESA, the IEP from the LEA is used to prove eligibility under the eligibility category of being a student with special needs. But once you become an ESA account holder, the district or the charter, the public school system, you're no longer enrolled with that school. So there isn't, you're not working with the LEA on your IEP, on delivering the services of those IEPs or updating them. So the only time they would be updated is if a parent went back to their district and requested an evaluation or a review. And that's something that's come up because in our separate policy regarding associated goods, you're eligible to purchase associated goods and assistive technology if you are a student with a disability. And the way you've proven that you're a student with a disability to the department is to give us a copy of an IEP. So that is what we've looked at and why it's come up in conversation recently as that new policy was put in place. We were spending time looking at IEPs after the initial application, which we really hadn't done in the past, which caused parents to start looking at their IEPs and wanting them to get updated, causing that tension with some of the LEAs who are then being asked to provide evaluations for students who are no longer enrolled in their schools. So just they're not updated unless just being part of the ESA program, they're not being used because those students are no longer part of the public school system.
So are federal requirements being met in regards to updating and reviewing and updating IEPs? Aren't there some federal requirements regarding that issue?
Vice President Corr, Member Baker, I don't want to get too far outside of my expertise in this area, especially as it relates to federal law. But when a parent or guardian signs a contract with the Department of Education for the ESA program, it changes what the obligations are to provide a student with a free and appropriate public education. So I don't want to say that they are waiving that because I don't think that's legally true, but in some way, the public schools are no longer obligated to provide those services when the parent signs a contract with ESA saying that they're going to receive public funding to support private options.
Yeah, I just want to make comment that it seems to me that, you know, for the sake of fiscal responsibility, for the sake of the parent, and most importantly, for the sake of the student, it seems to me that IEP should be subject to regular reviews. And I don't know if that's due to a lack of policy or lack of a law. I just simply want to publicly emphasize that it seems to me that's a weakness in the program that needs to be addressed somehow, some way.
Thank you, Member Baker. Any other questions or comments? Member Wellborn, please.
Thank you, Vice President Corr, members of the board, Deputy Marsh. So I'm very interested in this huge increase that you've seen in the applications in the program, and I have a couple questions around that. One is your data is through March 31st, so we've got 2 more months of experience since the end of March. So my first question is, you know, are you continuing to see this trend of a huge increase in applications? And I'm going to ask all my questions so I give you a chance to get them all done. And then secondly, oh, I'm sorry, I've got a barking dog. Secondly, you probably don't have data on this, but you may have anecdotal information of, you know, where this is coming from. Is it COVID related? Is it impacted by, you know, now that it looks like COVID is rescinding, and are things changing? Are people changing their wishes here? Or is this maybe a permanent thing we're going to see in the future? And the third part is that my understanding is that in the past, the department has been very strapped to provide the customer support needed for the ESA families, and that there was an increase in funding that allowed you to hire more staff and provide better support for the program. But again, if you're seeing a huge increase in the number of families participating in the program, do you anticipate that we're going to have another time in the future where the department is strapped to support the families that are in the program? Thanks.
Thank you, Vice President Corr, Member Wellborn. I'll try to get through those without forgetting anything. I did have them pull applications for April, since April has closed, and applications were up in April as compared to last April as well. So we are continuing, I don't have the number right in front of me, but we are continuing to see growth. Even I think March applications compared to last March were up over 90%. So we're continuing to see higher rates of applications than we have in prior years. This could be for multiple reasons. I think we're seeing more parent interest and engagement in choice in general in Arizona, but also across the country. That was spurred in part by, well, in large part, by the pandemic and schools being closed and being forced to be more engaged with your child's education and with remote learning and in-person options. And so I think just anecdotally, that's part of it, and what we're continuing to see. But applications were growing every year for the last 10 years, from year to year, as there's more awareness from parents about the program, and also as in many years, eligibility expanded. The legislature has passed laws throughout the last decade, every few years, that have expanded eligibility to include more students. So I don't have a specific reason to give you, but those are some of the things that we've heard and seen. And whether or not it's permanent, I think one of the things we noticed too when we look at, we have a large spike in applications and an increase in applications being approved and enrolled in the program this year. But when we looked between Q2 and Q3, the total number of ESAs didn't grow very much. It was like 1.2%. And that was because we saw close to as many students leave the program as we saw added to the program between Q2 and Q3. And I think this just is because of this year and the changes in options in our public school system. But we see this from year to year. Parents move in and out of the ESA program depending on the needs of their student and their families at the time. So I think that's part of it. I think I would fully expect to see permanent increase to the program and growth in applications, as we have seen throughout the last decade. But we also see students move back into the public school system depending on their needs at the time. Just like we see enrollment in the program is much higher in the earlier grades than in the later grades. And this may be because families like the flexibility or prefer homeschooling in younger grades than they do in the older grades. And then on the customer support, you are absolutely correct. We did receive several new positions and new funding last session, so for this fiscal year. And to be honest, it's really been a process as we're adopting rules and the program is expanding and we're changing our policies and we're adding new staff. It is a challenge to grow the program and your staff at the same time. And so it is something that this is, something the Auditor General's office has pointed out in their findings and recommendations in the last 12 months that we've been working with them, is that the department should regularly review workload and caseloads and prepare every year a request to the legislature supported by that analysis for additional staff if needed. So we didn't ask for additional staff for this budget that we're working on right now for this next fiscal year, but we are looking at the structure of the ESA program staff, how we have staff trained and cross-trained so that during upticks in applications, we have account specialists helping with applications. And when there are, more account reviews to do, we have application specialists who can help with that and also support the call center. So that's ongoing. And we anticipate that in the budget request for next year, we will likely be asking for additional support.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Member Baker, please.
One more. Thank you. Just a follow-up question on a comment that you made. You indicated that when a parent signs a contract for an empowerment scholarship, that things shift or change. That just brought up the question, you know, in a school district or at a charter school, a significant amount of the funding for special ed services comes from federal sources. So when a parent signs a contract for an empowerment scholarship, is federal funding still flowing to assist that student with special ed services, or because it's a contract, does all the funding come from the state?
Thank you, Vice President Core Member Baker. That's a great question. So the funding for ESA is all state funding, general fund. It is based on the state aid formula that does not include federal funding for LEAs either. And it's only a portion of the state aid formula, but it's fully funded by general fund. There's no local property taxes that go into it. And there's no federal funding that goes into it. And the federal funding allocations aren't even considered in the amount. So then when the parent gets that amount, and it's based on statutory formula, like I said, portion of that formula funded by general fund, it doesn't change based on the IEP, services required. And if you think about it, these families are no longer part of this public school system. So separate that, they're ESA families. If a student was to leave your school district to homeschool, what is happening with the IEP?
So,
Yeah,
so just to clarify, the question has also been raised, or it's been noted, there's a significant increase in applications, and that appears to be the trend. So what is occurring financially is a significant shift of funding responsibility from the federal government to state government as this program grows.
Vice President Core Member Baker, I don't think that's exactly right, because how the federal funds are determined at the LEA level, as we've noted in the last year with these ESSER allocations, isn't necessarily just based on student enrollment. So how that LEA is getting impacted when a student with disabilities or a student who qualifies under Title I leaves the school, I'm not sure if it reduces the federal aid going to that LEA. So I wouldn't be able to speak to that. And the amount of funding that's being provided by federal funding to LEAs to support these students isn't being considered as part of their ESA account amount, their funding amount for the year. So it's not necessarily like that. It also isn't the case, even though that it's the state funding formula solely funded by general fund, that it's offsetting local revenue. It's just more complicated than that. So while these students are fully funded by the general fund, it's just complex. So it's hard to say what the impact is to the local or federal funding is to the LEA.
Okay, I just know that as a superintendent, that I had a high needs special ed student. A lot of that money was coming from the federal government. And if that student then transfers to an empowerment scholarship, I understand what you're saying, but it seems to me that superficially, at least, it certainly looks like that significant expense, and you see some really big numbers as you look over the report that you just provided, that expense then shifts to the state.
Vice President Core Member Baker, I think the only thing I would say is that the funding is not based on your costs. So what revenue you receive as an LEA for students isn't based on your expenses. It's based on formulas, inputs. And so
It includes the number of students that you have in their identification.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Baker. Good points. Any other questions, comments, or concerns for Whitney? Whitney, once again, I want to thank you for taking some time and look forward to these quarterly reports. A lot of great information to digest for us.
Thank you.
We're right at about 90 minutes, so I'm going to give us a 10-minute break at this point. We've got a number of items related to opening rulemaking, but I've got 11:35. If we could take a 10-minute break, stretch our legs or grab coffee or whatever we need to do, and ask that you all be back at 11:45 to finish out the rest of the agenda.
Just as a reminder, as you come back from the break, please turn your camera on so I can ensure quorum. And then Jessica, please let us know when we resume live stream.
Hey, Jessica, it says I cannot start my video because the host has stopped it.
Sorry about that. We disabled it while we were on break. There you should go.
So I should take no personal offense that you turned my camera off, Jessica. It was nothing personal about me or my looks, anything like that, nothing?
Definitely not, Dr. Kaur.
Okay, fair enough, good, we're good.
Okay, just to let all the board members know, we are back to live streaming on YouTube. And then if Member Baker, Member Burton, Member Ruiz, once you're back, if you could turn your camera on so I can ensure quorum.
All right, well, thank you. And there we go. All right, well, welcome back. I believe we have quorum as best I can tell. So with that, with the next 4 items involve opening rulemaking. So 5C is presentation, discussion, and possible action to open rulemaking procedures on sex education. Director Williams.
Thank you, Vice President Kaur, members of the board. As Vice President Kaur stated, items 5, C, D, E, and F are all to open rulemaking on different areas. For item 5C specifically, this is in accordance with the executive order that was issued from Governor Ducey. Those are the only changes that have been going in to this rule. If any board members have any questions, staff is available to answer those questions. If not, I would recommend moving the motion.
Thank you, Alicia. Any questions? All right, hearing none, if I could get cameras on, please, I'll entertain a motion to open rulemaking on sex education. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Wellborn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Member Kate. Thank you so much. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of opening rulemaking, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Thank you. Then we will move on to 5D, presentation, discussion, possible action to open rulemaking related to educator discipline. Director Williams.
Thank you, Vice President, core members of the board. This is to open rulemaking pertaining to our bill that was passed earlier this session. If there are any questions, board staff's available. If not, I would recommend moving the motion.
Thank you, Director Williams. Any questions for Alicia? Hearing none, then I will entertain a motion to open rulemaking related to educator discipline. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Burton, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Member Wellborn, thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none, seeing none. Hate to keep doing this, but if I could get cameras on, if you would. Thank you so much. Please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. All right, marching right through, we'll move to 5E, presentation, discussion, and possible action to open rulemaking on the state seal of biliteracy. Director Williams.
Thank you, Vice President, core members of the board. This opening of rule is pursuant to the statute change. So if there's no questions, then I would recommend moving the motion.
Do we have any questions for Director Williams? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to open rulemaking on the state seal of biliteracy. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Wilborn, do I have a second?
Second.
I think that was President Narducci sneaking in there by a hair. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, now we're all getting on cameras. Good, thank you. So all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Thank you. Our last of the opening of rulemaking is 5F. This speaks to the presentation, discussion, and possible action to open rulemaking on emergency administration of inhalers and emergency administration of auto-injectable ephedrine. Director Williams.
Thank you, Vice President, core members. If there are no questions, then you could move the motion.
I just want to have a clarification. It's actually epinephrine, not ephedrine.
Thank you, Member Burton. I appreciate that. I stumbled over that, so I appreciate that as I stand corrected. Any questions for Director Williams? Watch how I completely avoid it this time, Christine. I would then entertain a motion to open the rule for the rules before us.
So moved.
Thank you for bailing me out. Member Burton, do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Member Kay, thank you so much. Any other discussion? Fair enough, then all those in favor of opening rulemaking, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Thank you. All right, we move on to the highlight of every month, and that is a legislative update provided to us by Deputy Director Ketcher Baden.
Thank you, Vice President Core, Superintendent Hoffman, and members. This week could be the last week of session, which is probably the first time I've been able to say that with a high degree of probability or likelihood compared to preceding weeks. Doesn't mean it's going to happen this week, but it does look like the legislature is going to try to introduce budget bills later today, which means they could get the budget out by the end of the week, and they could wrap up session if they wanted to by the end of this week as well. They don't have to, but they could. With your agenda item here, you have a couple items, and you have two items if you're logged into Assembly that you'll be able to see. If not, it's just the one. But we have the post-session, action items, and that's the list of items that we provide just about every year, just around this time, May, sometimes earlier. The legislature finishes earlier, but if not, then it's around this time. And these are the list of bills that have already been passed and signed by the governor. Of course, being a board of education, a lot of the bills that are signed have implications for the upcoming school year. And so that's actually a big reason why this board has a partial rulemaking exemption anyways, and that's because the board has to get through some rulemaking before the upcoming school year as a result of legislation that is passed that same calendar year. And so you already have approved opening rulemaking on several items, all of which were the result of legislation, and you're probably going to see some more. The only other couple things I wanted to go through that are on that list is House Bill 2862, which on here is listed as Arizona Online Instruction Policies. That's actually a bill that is around instructional time and has a lot of other things in there that are not related to AOIs, but the piece specific to what relates to the board concerns online instruction. And specifically, that bill allows schools, one of the things that that bill does, but the one that impacts this board, is it allows schools to provide remote or online instruction without an approved AOI if their total instructional time is below a certain threshold in the LEA. Obviously, that's important for this board because we've been churning through a lot of AOI applications in the last year because of the increased demand and need for online and remote instruction. ADE did put out some guidance. I'm sorry, it wasn't guidance. It was notification of that bill passing and being signed last week. They are working on guidance, but we are going to have to work with the Department of Ed as well as the charter board on some policies for what happens if schools exceed that threshold that I described, which could include requiring them to get approved as an AOI for future years. So that's something we're going to be working on. And you see the deadlines there for when we want to try to get some of these things done is on that sheet as well. The deadline for that is our August board meeting. That'll hopefully give enough time for ADE to develop guidance and us to work with the charter board on trying to get on the same page. Another bill is House Bill 2135, which is sometimes been called the modularization bill. That actually was taken out of the short title, but probably still call it that just because that's our understanding. We've already had a good meeting with the standards team at the Department of Ed and have come up with a game plan, on how to implement that bill. And for the board right now, that includes directing their standards team to work on creating what the bill calls the learning outcomes or the competencies that are within the standards, beginning with math and specifically beginning with Algebra 1. The board under the bill is charged with approving those learning outcomes by December of 22. So some time to implement that one, which is very much appreciated. And essentially, unless the board has any objections, we'll consider that direction to have happened. And the standards team has already started working informally on that, but we'll certainly have a green light after this meeting. And then you saw the other rulemaking packages related to educator discipline, EpiPens, et cetera, and so forth in this agenda today. The only other thing that's hanging out there that you'll see in June is rule on school district procurement. There is a bill that requires the board to adopt some conforming changes to our school district procurement rules. So you'll probably see that at the June board meeting, and we'll try to wrap that up by the end of the calendar year. So we provide these so you have an idea of when we try to implement them and also to hold ourselves accountable to the public and to everybody else in the legislature so they know we're doing our jobs. And then the other list, of course, is the list of bills still moving through the process. There's about 8 of those bills still moving, or moving might also be a generous term because the legislature's been working on the budget the last few weeks. Some of those bills have basically been waiting for the budget to pass. Some of them might not be waiting for the budget to pass at all. Some of them might just be dead, but it's kind of hard to tell the difference this time of year. So there's 8 that might still end up making it across the finish line and getting signed, which would add to that list of post-session action items that I just went through real briefly. So we'll be on the lookout for that. And of course, that excludes anything that might be in the budget, which hopefully we'll see later today. So with all that, I will stop there and make myself available for any questions, comments, concerns, or input.
Thank you, Deputy Baden. Any questions for Ketcher?
Vice President Kaur, this is Alicia. It says such a question for Ketcher Baden, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to be sentimental that Deputy Director Baden has worked tirelessly this legislative session. And I'm very proud of the work that he's done for not only me in keeping my sanity, but also the work that he has done for the State Board of Education. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to publicly thank him and tell him how awesome he is.
Hear, hear. Very nicely done. I see unanimous approval of that sentiment here on the screen. So nicely done, Ketcher.
Thank you. My ego is sufficiently inflated for today. So but honestly, I do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Just for today? All that
Just for
gets you through today?
It's
That's
fragile,
very...
Dr. Kaur. It's a fragile ego, but I sincerely, I do appreciate it. And it's easy to work for you all and work hard for everybody here. So, but I do appreciate it.
Awesome. We all really do appreciate your efforts, and thank you, Alicia, for bringing them to light. I think that's unanimously felt by this group. So, so no questions for Catcher. Bring home a budget this week. We would appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
With that, we will move on to item 6. This is the call to the public for certification enforcement actions on the consent agenda. Alicia, do we have any requests to speak to these issues?
Vice President Kaur, we do not have any requests to speak for item 6 or 8.
6 or 8. Okay. Then we will move to agenda item 7. This is the consent agenda for certification enforcement actions. As they are all on the consent agenda, I would ask that this be taken as a single motion. And with that, do I have a motion to approve items 7A1 through 7A8?
So move.
Thank you, Member Baker. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Member Kay. Thank you so much. I see all cameras on. I appreciate that. Then all those in favor of approving items 7A1 through 7A8, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you. It's approved. And again, no one has indicated a desire to speak to us for item 8. So I will move us directly on to the general session as it in regards to certification enforcement actions. These are all negotiated settlements. And if it meets with the board's approval, I will take a single motion to cover items 9A1 through 9A4. Do I have such a motion?
So move.
Member Baker, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Was that Member Kay?
Yes.
Thank you, Member Kay. Appreciate it. Any discussion or conversation regarding any of these issues? If not, I will call a vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you. Approved. Then we will move on to 9B. This is the presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to suspend the certificates of Crystal Dawn Gilham for a period of 1 year. Do I have a motion to that effect?
Vice President Kaur, for PPAC matters, it's very important that the motion is specified out as written in the recommendations.
Excellent. Then I'll get to go into my little monologue here then. Okay, fair enough. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the PPAC to suspend any and all teaching certificates held by Crystal Dawn Gilham for a period of 1 year with the condition of successful completion of a course in ethics and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
Thank you, President Narducci. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Member Baker. Any discussion regarding 9B? Hearing none, then I will call the question. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign. It is approved. We will move on to 9C, which is the presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the certificates of Jaylen Gantt for a period of 5 years. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the PPAC to revoke any and all teaching certificates held by Jaylen Gantt for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Member Wellborn, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Member Kay, thank you. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Thank you. We will move on to 9D. This is the presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to suspend the certificates of Scott Nettles for a period of 18 months. Member Baker, I've been alerted that you may need to recuse yourself from this question. Is that the case?
That is the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Baker. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and the recommendations of the PPAC to suspend any and all teaching certificates held by Scott Nettles for a period of 18 months with the condition of a successful completion of a classroom management course, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
President Narducci, was that Member Ruiz with the second?
Sure, second it.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Armando. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. It is approved. We will move on to 9E. Presentation, discussion, and possible action of the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to suspend the certificates of Nicholas Ross for a period of 1 year. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC to suspend any and all teaching certificates held by Nicholas Ross for a period of 1 year with the condition of successful completion of a 1-year alcohol treatment program, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Baker, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Member Kay, thank you very much. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Thank you. 9F, presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to issue a letter of censure on the certificate of James Simmons. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and the recommendations of the PPAC to issue a letter of censure on any and all teaching certificates held by James Simmons, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Wellborn, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Member Ruiz, thank you so much. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor to accept the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. All right, looks like we've made it through that. Thank you. Item 10 is a summary of current events, future meetings, dates, and agenda, and items for future agendas. Anyone have anything to share at this point?
Yes.
Yes, please, Member Baker.
It's my understanding we're going to be shifting back into dealing with accountability and coming up hopefully with a plan moving forward. And I just want to thank staff for moving in that direction and strongly encourage staff and the rest of the board to really push on this. We have spent the last 5 years trying to come up with a good framework for accountability, and I think we have that. Certainly there needs to be things that need to be tuned up and improved. That's an annual issue, but it's so important for people in the field to know that there is a system and that there's stability and they can look forward with some degree of certainty as to how they're going to be held accountable. So I just think that's such an important role that we play, and I'm really convinced that we need to be proactive and take a very strong initiative in maintaining what we have and improving on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Baker. Member Wellborn.
Thank you, Vice President Corr, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Along the same lines of what Member Baker talked about in accountability, I've been thinking about looking forward in terms of what is fair in the system. Schools will have an enormous challenge in addressing the learning loss that students have experienced this past year. And I'm also taking note that the ESSER 3 funding requires schools to allocate 20% of their allocation towards evidence-based methodologies dealing with how to accelerate learning with students and how to try and catch them up. So what I would like to see, if in light of the new mini meetings that the board is planning to have, I'm wondering if we can ask staff to bring this up as a topic where we can discuss at a very strategic level, not at a detailed level, but to discuss strategically what is fair moving forward. I myself am not familiar with evidence-based methodologies for executive learning. I'm not familiar with what gains can be achieved under such methodologies. I'm not familiar with what we as a state are doing to help schools navigate this path. And I just think it's worthwhile discussion so that we can have an expectation or a hope of when we can get through this bubble. Is it going to take a year? Is it going to take 2 years? Is it taking 3 years? And I'm hoping that we can have enough robust discussion that we feel the schools have been fairly treated in this process, because when the numbers come out, it's going to be sobering, and I'm looking for some pathway forward on how we can encourage schools that will have a fair system for dealing with where they've been. Specifically in that topic is to use scores that students had 2 years ago as the basis for a growth model. I question whether that's fair. I don't know what the solution is, but I just think it would be worthwhile to have some of these discussions. So with your support, I'd like to ask staff to see if we can have some discussions around these strategic topics.
Thank you, Member Wellborn. Director Williams, I trust you're kind of collecting and coalescing these thoughts of Member Wellborn and Baker.
Yes, Vice President Corr, I have taken many notes. on many sheets of paper.
Okay, very good. Then many thanks for that. I think good suggestions both. Any other comments or thoughts? Yeah, Member Wellborn, please.
I'm sorry, I forgot to add on. I just wanted to hear from staff. Are we still committed to the August retreat, or is that, I heard something that might be changed. So if you could clarify our calendar for the summer, I appreciate it.
Sure. So Vice President Corr and members of the board, we will more than likely hold a board meeting. If you recall, back in October, we approved the retreat and board member schedule for August. The meeting was going to be on a Friday and the retreat would be on a Saturday. So we will hold true to that meeting date of that Friday. And we more than likely will not have a specific retreat, as all of us have experienced the past couple years. We will utilize more of the mini meeting format to have robust conversations around important topics. And then that should come out, hopefully more information by like mid-June, before our June board meeting.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I guess I will take privilege and just follow up on some comments that Superintendent Hoffman made. This past weekend was graduation in Yuma. All our Yuma high schools held their graduation. Just amazing to see the perseverance and grit and tenacity of those students who fought through so much to be able to walk across that stage. We replicated that the week before here at AWC with our graduation. Graduation is like Christmas morning for educators, right? It's just our favorite time of year. And it was on full display in Yuma on Friday night, and it was amazing, and it was just incredible. So to all the graduates across the state, I know on all of our behalf, just we're really proud of them and look forward to big things from them. So with that, at 12:16, I will, do I need a motion to adjourn? I don't. I just get to say we're adjourned, huh? Fantastic. Well, by the power invested in me by Alicia Williams, I will adjourn this meeting at 12:16 and wish you all